Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis on a Monday morning. Landis, good to see you.
Good to see you. How you doing?
We spent a lot of time together this weekend, but now we back.
Yeah.
And you are not announcing your departure from the show today. Is that correct?
No. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I thought about it. I took a Sunday to ponder, and I'm still here.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So that's a victory for Doug. That 10 hours and you're not leaving after a 10-hour Saturday. Thanks, everybody who joined us on our watch-along on Saturday for the Penn State-Ohio State game, for the Michigan-Oregon game, anybody who came back on Saturday night for a normal 11 p.m. Eastern post-game show. We had an awesome time, and it wouldn't have been fun if it was just two guys in a basement. It's much more fun when it's two guys in a basement and then hanging out with our northern community here. So really appreciate everybody who was part of that, and we may try it again down the line, and if you weren't part of it, maybe you can catch it next time. But we're here on a regular Monday, Bill, but we're not doing the typical Monday show. A little more vibes today. I do think we do a nice amount of research and nonsense, right? I think I like our mix. I like our college football stew. And today today's a little bit more of a microwave meal, and we'll maybe explain later in the show why this is, but it's a little more vibes today, but it's vibes coupled with how dumb we are, which I think is entertaining because we are going back and we're looking at our preseason predictions for our 28 Northern teams, other various things we said, and we're going to see where we were dumb, where we were smart, and that will contextualize even more where our Northern teams are right now. So we're doing it for a reason, Bill.
You called it a microwave meal. I might say we're reheating something, right?
That's fair.
We're bringing it back.
We made it originally. It's just been in the fridge. You ever do that? Like you get to the back of the fridge and it's like, has this been in here a week or a month? Who cares? Heat it up.
A month? I've thought 6 months. How long's this thing been in here? Yeah.
So that's what we're doing today, and we'll get to that in a little bit. We have dumb and smart takes on BYU and Utah, on Indiana, on Notre Dame, on Ohio State, on Michigan, on Nebraska, on Illinois and Purdue, on Colorado, on Syracuse, on a ton of our Northern teams. But we're going to start with our top 11 and a half rankings, and then we're going to get to our South Cram-o-Meter, Bill, because we do have, I think if you are consuming another national college football show, and we are a national college football show with a particular regional interest.
Yes.
If you're consuming a national college football show today, they very well might be talking about Georgia Ole Miss and or Alabama LSU, because those are probably the two biggest games of this upcoming weekend. But I officially am going to start calling those games meteor games. Meteor, not meteor. They're not meteor. They're meteor, which means root for the meteor. That, like, I don't know what's going to happen. On one hand, it's good that some Southern team has to lose those games. On the other hand, like, oh my gosh. So, like, that's not what we're doing on this Monday. We're not doing a lot of Ole Miss, Georgia.
No, maybe we'll pick those games on Thursday.
Yeah.
Purely off of vibes and what is best for our Northern agenda. But yeah, otherwise, screw them.
No Jackson Dart research. And I actually am in a good mood today because I listened to something. You and I were both driving over the weekend, and I listened to something Sunday night that I had not listened to before, and it made me feel very good about things. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's start with our top 11 and a half rankings, Bill. We do this every Monday, but we are really trying to think like committee members today. Yes. I would love to be a committee member someday. They have a media member on it. Perhaps my robust Northern allegiance would disqualify me from future unbiased committee endeavors.
Who are we thinking about for the committee? How about Doug Lesmerises? All right, let's just check into his back. Oh, he swings swords and tells us how crappy Georgia is. Maybe not.
But couldn't they use a little bit of that on the committee?
They could definitely use swords. Yeah, they could use a sword or two in that room, no doubt.
I'm not ranking Georgia because their coach pushed a guy. Couldn't they use a little bit of that? I think the sport needs more of that on the highest level. But we want to think like committee members. A million different media members have done it over the years. I did it one time where I went to Grapevine, Texas, and I did a mock media thing. I still have a binder in here somewhere about how you do it. It's where I got to be very, very best friends with Joel Klatt.
How do they treat you in that experience? They hook you up, or you just like go in the room and then they say see you later?
No, they hook you up. They really try to simulate the whole the way you walk in, they talk about like they have a hat rack there to like hang your allegiances on the coat rack or something, and then you sit in somebody's spot. They really try to replicate the experience of like it really is the whole deal. So when I did it like many years ago, Joel Klatt was there and Yogi Roth was there, which is like the first time that I met Yogi Roth. He was
What a handsome room.
Thank you.
How'd you guys get anything done? It's been distracted the whole time.
And for the people who have, this was a thing for a while. They take black and white glamour shot photos during the thing, and then send them to you when you were done. And they're just photos where I'm just like staring into Joel Klatt's eyes. Where it's one of those memes where like find someone who looks at you the way Doug Lesmerises looks at Joel Klatt in the mock committee room. So that's why whenever I see Joel Klatt now, Joel Klatt is like, hey, Doug, like, can you please stay 30 feet away from me? It's normal. It's normal.
Yeah.
It's completely normal.
Yeah.
Healthy. It's normal. Can we think like committee members? When I said, hey, we're going to do it this week, because as people know, Tuesday night, the first college football playoff rankings will come out with the 13-member committee. Dan Wetzel and I talked about this all last Tuesday to give you a heads up about it, because also there's other stuff happening tomorrow. But if I say, Bill, let's remind ourselves to think like committee members. And that didn't necessarily to mean let's be predictive. It means like think how the cases you would make in the room, which doesn't necessarily agree with the committee, but what you would say in the room. Is that any different than what you do normal weeks? Did it lock it in at all to say, think like a committee member?
No, because I did try to be a little predictive. So
okay, that's okay.
I think I might have misunderstood the assignment a little bit. No, I like typically I do try to do that. Yeah, typically, and honestly, what I cooked up is not all that different from what it would be if I wasn't trying to be predictive. There's maybe a team or two that are, I guess I would say like there aren't any teams that I think the committee will rank that maybe I wouldn't rank. I think maybe my order would just differ if I were actually not trying to be predictive.
Okay, so what we're doing here again is we do our top 11 and a half rankings. We're doing that again. When you get to the end, it's going to be the 4 conference champs or the top 4 seeds, and the group of 5 is going to definitely be in. But when they do the rankings on Tuesday night, Bill, it's just a top 25. They're not going to rank it like, oh, the number 3 team is the team we think is going to win the ACC or the Big 12. And their number 12 team is not going to be the team they think is going to be the group of 5 representative. It's just going to be a top 12. So we do top 11 and a half. That's just what we're doing here. So let's bring up yours first. And maybe why don't you run through yours all the way through, and then I'll run through mine all the way through, and then we can talk about where we differ and how we think the committee is going to behave.
Sure. Number 1 is Oregon. I mean, I think anyone would be shocked by any other result there. So in my efforts to, I think, be a little more predictive than necessarily reflecting what I would do, I have Georgia 2 and Ohio State 3. I think I would actually flip-flop them if I were making it myself, just off what I think. Miami 4, Tennessee 5, Texas 6, Penn State 7, BYU 8, SMU 9, Indiana 10, Notre Dame 11, and then Alabama is the 11.5 spot. Going through it, I felt pretty certain after looking through all the teams that would be in consideration that there will not be a 2-loss team that finds its way into the top 10. I think I'd be, and part of that is the Texas A&M, LSU, Ole Miss kind of combo group there, where Texas A&M has beaten LSU and LSU has beaten Ole Miss, and it's like, what do you do with those 3 teams? Oh, I guess we'll just punt and put them somewhere in the middle of the rankings rather than try to find a way to put them in the top 10. So I don't have any 2-loss teams in my top 11. Alabama is the first 2-loss team I have mentioned there, because I think with its win against Georgia and frankly its loss, I think probably doesn't look all that bad considering that Vanderbilt is ranked. I'm not saying that is not me speaking. That is how I think it would be justified, that Alabama losing on the road to a ranked Vanderbilt team will actually not be penalized all that much. And so I think Alabama probably will end up being the highest ranked 2-loss team.
That's why I would have to bring my sword to the committee room. I would just like when these, because the SEC, the section of it all is very confusing. And It's one of the things I'm most interested about. Let me do my rankings first. I do think that there's one team that is the most important team in the rankings. Here's mine. Fairly similar to yours. I have Oregon 1. I have Ohio State 2. Georgia 3. I have Indiana 4. Miami 5. Penn State 6. BYU 7. Texas 8. I think there's a line at Texas. I felt pretty confident about my top 8, and then I started getting hazy after Texas. SMU 9, Notre Dame 10, Tennessee 11, and then I have Iowa State 12. So I think Indiana is 8th in the AP poll this week, which is a jump for them. It's the first time they're in the top 10. I really think Indiana has a chance to be in the top 5 with the committee. Because when you, for instance, compare a team like Indiana and a team like Miami, Miami doesn't have a ton of great wins either, and Miami has a ton of close games, and Indiana has controlled every game. And as we said, I double-checked some of the efficiency metrics and things this morning. I think they're not updated from this weekend's games, at least when I look. So I didn't have final numbers. Miami's pretty good, but Indiana is excellent, I think. And I do believe when the committee drills down on that, I don't think there's a huge difference between Indiana's schedule and Miami's schedule. And Indiana has been far more dominant in its schedule. So I think the case for Indiana to be ranked ahead of Miami is pretty strong. And I think the committee will be having some serious Indiana-Miami discussions in a way that the AP poll has never reflected the entire year.
I think they should. I don't know that they will. I think Indiana will eventually just lose the strength of schedule argument. And I wouldn't agree with that, because your schedule is your schedule, right? And yes, they did kind of they set themselves up with a nice non-conference schedule, no doubt about that. But then it got in the conference play and can't control who the Big Ten put on its schedule, and all it can do is beat teams by the margins that it's beat them by. So that would be my argument for Indiana is their sheer dominance. I think the game control stuff would favor Indiana. I think like SP Plus and all that stuff favors Indiana, or I guess it doesn't. Was SP Plus updated? I saw Bill Connolly say that there was some kind of mix up. The ones I looked at had Miami 7th and Indiana 11th.
Okay.
So I guess that's fairly competitive. But Indiana's strength of schedule, I think, at least on the ESPN metrics, ranks in the hundreds, or maybe it is 100. I think that will be the reason that Indiana is not ranked ahead of Miami, and why Indiana, I think, will be ranked behind some one-loss teams.
I think that strength of schedule is wrong, because I'm not saying you're citing it incorrectly. Here's the thing, right? Statistics are great when you agree with them, and they're terrible when you disagree with them. I looked at some Jeff Sagarin stats. Jeff Sagarin is one of the fathers, one of the parents of college football data. That was a guy who was doing it like in USA Today in the 80s, I think. His strength of schedule has Miami at 54 and Indiana at 81, which I don't think is that large of a gap when you then talk about the way they have won their games. Some of these data points, though, Sagarin, for instance, also has he has a record versus top 30. So you can just draw lines wherever you want to draw them. Do you want it to be top 25? Do you want it to be top 40? Whatever. It's just Miami.
We've heard the committee in the past randomly assign wins against teams with a winning record, just like something they pulled out of their butt to justify their rankings.
Yeah. So it's just life is about where you draw lines. So a lot of times people have arguments, and it's not we disagree. It's just I drew the line a little bit of a different spot than you did. And it perhaps changed the context in a gigantic way. Because if you've played nobody in the top 25, but you have 4 wins over teams between 26 and 40, now all of a sudden you have 4 top 40 wins, but you have 0 top 25 wins. Right. And so it just depends how you want to look at it. The Sagarin ratings say Miami has 3 top 30 wins and Indiana has none. But when you think about the Florida win at the beginning of the year is now a top 30 win in the Sagarin ratings. But that Florida team is not this Florida team that was playing DJ Lagway and started to play better. That Florida team was the one that wanted to get its coach fired, right? So to just be like, oh, Florida's a top 30 win, Indiana would have rolled that Florida team. And I don't know that Florida team is not better than the Michigan State team that Indiana just destroyed on Saturday, right? What's the difference between week 1 Graham Mertz and week 9 Aiden Childs, right? Like, so I think there are some things that if you just go on some raw stuff, Indiana could fall short. But if you look at it a second time, and again, if your strength of schedule is 50 versus 80, as opposed to Indiana's in the hundreds and Miami's in the 40s or something, I just think the dominance will matter to them. And I think the efficiency metrics on both sides of the ball will matter. And I think Indiana's going to be, let me look, top 6 in the committee rankings. So I have them 4th, but predictively, I'll say Indiana's going to be in the top 6 on Tuesday night.
I had them 10th. And you know, wouldn't be the first time I was wrong. And that is me trying to be predictive. I just don't know. I think the Miami, I think that 3-0 record that you cited could very well be what's cited for Miami in its favor. I just don't know how much that room's going to respect Indiana's path thus far. And again, like, I think it will be wrong if they don't, but I can just see them talking about strength of schedule, just like sheer lack of super quality opponents for Indiana, and also maybe being like a little bit in a wait and see mode. Like that, you're gonna, that shouldn't factor into it, right? It's never supposed to be forward looking. And it's not that I think Michigan's a world beater, but like on the precipice of Indiana playing Michigan, maybe you're a little hesitant to rank them higher than you would otherwise, because you know you're going to have another decent look at them this week. You're going to have a great look at them in a couple weeks when they play Ohio State. So I guess I can sense some hesitancy with the people in that room kind of wrapping their arms around what Indiana's done thus far and being a little more receptive to a Miami, and honestly, even to some of the one-loss SEC teams that I have ahead of them, including Tennessee and Texas, and even Penn State. And I think that the thing about like Florida now necessarily, or all of a sudden being a quality win for Miami is I think you're right. I also think it's a little bit of a difficult conversation for me, because you can say the same thing about BYU, right? BYU beat an SMU. BYU will want to point to a win against SMU as like one of the better wins in the country. But at the time that it happened, SMU wasn't very good. And the game was like, whatever it was, like 18-15 or something like that. But should BYU be penalized because SMU is now better than it was? Like, I don't think so. So I would want to apply the same logic, I guess, to.
Well, it's not that it's reverse logic.
It's reverse logic, but it's the same idea.
Yeah.
It's similar.
Yeah, that teams change.
Yeah, teams change.
But that to me is like, that is such an SEC thing. Not that you're saying, but that like they would do. That it's like, well, they weren't that good then, but they're good now because they've done all like this muck, this SEC muck, that there's the tendency to find the best in every bit of SEC muck. It's like you plunge your hand into the trough of the SEC. And you see what you grab. And then, but whatever you pull up, it's like, oh, it's a fistful of crap, but look at how beautiful it is. That's what we're doing here. It's a trough of muck. Let me have this other conversation with you before we move on to some other things. Ohio State and Georgia, I do think really have fairly similar resumes now. I think for Georgia to win at Texas and Ohio State to win at Penn State, I think is very similar. One of the things that Penn State didn't do was bench its starting quarterback in the middle of the game. So I think, I understand that Texas was ranked number 1 then, but Penn State was number 3. And then they both lost on the road to ranked teams, but Ohio State's was a 1-point loss to the current number 1, and Georgia's was a crazy, wild. They got blown out, then they came back and took the lead. Then they blew it at the end to a team that has turned out to have very many flaws. And then again, Ohio State has some excellent efficiency metrics. I think that should favor Ohio State. And you did say if you were being more predictive, maybe you actually would have Ohio State over Georgia. I am super curious about this. I'm not sure.
No, it's the opposite. If I were being if I wasn't being predictive, I'd have Ohio State over Georgia. Right, I think Ohio State should be over Georgia. Yeah.
But your list has Georgia over them. I have Ohio State over them. But like, as we actually think about it, we think Ohio State should be over Georgia because they are very similar. I do think Ohio State's inside numbers about the team are better. And I can hear Ward Manuel saying Georgia has turned the ball over at an inopportune rate. Like Carson Beck throwing a bunch of picks, like matters.
Yeah.
And I hope, again, if we're going to have a strength, that Florida team, they're better than you think. There's the Florida team that lost its quarterback and wound up playing a third string Ivy League transfer in the second half against Georgia. They do take that into account. So I think Ohio State should be ahead of Georgia, but I also think Ohio State will be ahead of Georgia. You think Ohio State should be, but you think Georgia will be ahead of Ohio State. What do you think the committee's why would you think they'll go that way?
I think for me, it just came down to, I was going through it. I initially had Ohio State ahead, and then I flipped it because as I was going through it, I had Texas ahead of Penn State. And I think that might be enough for them to put Georgia ahead. I was also surprised to see, watch Georgia play. Wouldn't tell you this. They're 7th in that game control metric that ESPN has. I don't know how that's possible when they were definitely not in control of the first half against Alabama, and then have had some other games with wonky scores. So I don't know why that team is top 10 in that metric or what actually all goes into that. Ohio State is still better. And Ohio State's first in SP Plus. Ohio State is first in the Brian Freemo rankings that we cite a lot. So all of the metrics, I think, in comparison to Georgia, almost all of them favor Ohio State. I don't know that the committee would be so discerning of Ohio State only lost by 1 and Georgia lost by more to Alabama and was sort of non-functional for a half there. I think they'll just look at both and say that's a fine loss, and then get more into the big wins that are propping them up. And Georgia beat Texas by more on the road than Ohio State did against Penn State on the road, which again, I would not agree with. I would very much lean on Ohio State has had longer stretches of, I think, far more quality football than Georgia has. But I don't know that that'll be the conversation.
One other team, we don't have to spend a lot on this. You and I both have SMU higher than the AP poll does. You and I both have them you and I both have them 9th. The AP poll has them 13th. I think SMU has a chance to have a little juice here because they're coming off an impressive win, and their one loss is to a top 10 undefeated team. So you can start staring at SMU, and I could see that being a kind of team the committee really likes.
I think they'll be helped too. Just got a huge win against a ranked team. I'm a Pitt team that will still be ranked.
Yes.
And it also beat a Louisville team that the committee just watched beat Clemson. So I think that'll help SMU as well. I do think I had SMU 9th. I just kind of paired them with BYU at 8 and 9. And I guess the BYU does create a ceiling for SMU, but I could certainly see that team being fairly high up there. If it were a case of maybe once you get past the Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Miami conversation, maybe that BYU is next and SMU might be right behind them. I don't know that I'd be surprised by that.
So I would like to maybe have another conversation about this at some point, but in the rankings versus power ratings discussion, right? As we are here we are on election eve, we're using a word here that actually can make it confusing, but this is where I have arrived on this, which is why I think power ratings are I don't like. Power ratings in sports, especially in college football, are polls. They're election polls. They are you saying this is what I think is going to happen, and they're looking forward. Where rankings are election results, and it's this is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we are at a place where I think right now everybody is sick of polls. You just want to know what's going to happen. What's going to be the actual result of an election? And for us to have that in a sport like college football, where we have things that happened to tell us how we should think about teams, and for you to just think, no, I'm going to go on ratings, it just does continue to drive me nuts a little bit. And there just are certain people out there who continually hammer power ratings instead of rankings in a way that I think is practically harmful to the sport, and at best is nothing. It's either air, it's either puffery, or it's actually harmful. So I just like, here we are as we're, sports and politics, which we don't do here. But just like that idea, that's crystallized for me a little bit, Landis. Don't people just want results? I like results. I don't know about you.
I like results, but the power ratings, I think, I would actually say like the power rating mindset is more productive when you're trying to like preview games and stuff or like figure out matchups. No, like than a ranking, than like it's not an arbitrary ranking, but like a ranking that is based off of pure past performance and doesn't really take anything forward looking into account. Like I think there's a place for power ratings. I just like it gets confusing when power ratings and rankings get conflated, and we're trying to have a discussion about rankings.
I don't like when people use power ratings instead of rankings. And it's not like when I pick games, I just say, well, who's ranked higher in the AP poll? I'm going to pick the team that's ranked higher. So like, that's not what that is. So anyway, it just drives me absolutely freaking bananas. We're going to have Brian Fremeau on the show. You mentioned his ratings. The plan is to have him on Tuesday's show. This is one of the things where there's just an example here that can drive me crazy about computer ratings. And I just wanted to cite this very quickly. In the Sagarin ratings, and the Sagarin ratings were one of the 6 that were used, one of the 6 computer models that were part of the BCS back in the day, right? In those ratings, USC, which is 4 and 5 on the field, is ranked 26th in the country in the Sagarin ratings. These are the 5 teams that USC has lost to and where they rank in the same computer model, okay? All these teams have beaten USC. 4 and 5 USC is 26th. 7 and 1 Penn State is 10th, so they beat USC and they're ahead of them. Okay. 6 and 3 Minnesota is 28th. They beat USC. They have 2 more wins. They're behind USC. 5 and 4 Michigan is 40th. They're 14 spots behind USC. They beat USC. 5 and 4 Washington is 43rd. They have a better record than USC. They beat USC. They're 17 spots behind USC. And 4 and 4 Maryland is 67th. With the win over USC. So when I see things like that, that sort of makes me want to say, throw all the computers in the ocean. I don't want anything to do with computers. Like, I don't know. And they serve a role, but also this is why I think we got away from that a little bit, because like that's nonsensical. For what we have in a small data sample situation where you're playing 12 regular season games and you're not playing everybody in the country, and we've got to be able to figure some stuff out. That means nothing to me. I know you just put the numbers in and run it. That's worse than nothing. That USC is ranked ahead of 4 of the 5 teams that lost to. USC with a losing record is 26th in those computer ratings. Doesn't that drive you crazy, or is it just like stuff's going to happen?
Calm down, well, it's not. It does drive me crazy. I guess there would have been enough like baked into the BCS formula that the USC still wouldn't be ranked right in the top 25 to help avoid that. But it is my issue at times when I look at this stuff, because I was looking at some of it too. It's like Army's 60th in the Sagarin. They're 8-0, they're 60th, and USC is in the top 20, or what are they? 26. You said
26th. Yeah,
they're actually in Brian Fremeau's rankings. USC is 18th. So those are efficiency metrics. It's more about obviously how you play than it is results. But yeah, that's when things get a little confusing. Obviously, it's easy, I think, to eliminate a team that has 5 losses. But when you're in the conversation of like 1-loss teams and 3-loss teams, and there's a 3-loss team that's 25 spots higher than a 1-loss team, it's like I don't know what you're supposed to do with that.
But particularly with the head-to-head stuff, I understand that schedule strength matters. And like I always say, what would you do? If you really are a schedule strength person, what would you do with the team that was 0-12 and its 12 losses were to the 12 best teams in the country? Would you make a case that they should be 13th? Or would you say, well, you gotta
what conference
somewhere?
Are they from?
Definitely the SEC, of course. Like, oh, Vanderbilt. Let me tell you. Oh, they are the best 0-12 team in the country. They would win the Big 12, even though they couldn't beat Kentucky, LSU, Florida, South Carolina, right? So at some point, because this is now we're just drawing lines. So are you saying wins don't matter? Like, okay. Like if you're going to power rate, Would you rank an 0-12 team 13th in the country in your power ratings? And I almost think if you're a power rater, your answer should be yes. It's not about wins and losses. It's about how you play and who you are. And it's predictive. And I'm telling, 0-12. Oh, you don't want to play for real? So I want you as a power rater, not you, Bill, but you out in the world who's a power rater, to have to say a ridiculous thing. Because then if you say, well, no, I wouldn't do that, it's like, oh, so winning on the field actually does matter then. Okay. So now you're back on my side. So now let's figure out where the line is, because now you're admitting what I already think, which is, how about results, brother? How about results?
We can do a radical experiment for KOTM. We can pay a good team to just find ways to throw games so they can like play really well but still finish 0-12.
Yeah. And then just
people react.
The power raters will just go crazy. All right, let's cram it. It's cram it time. You ready to cram it, Landis? We'll have cram it music by next year.
Yeah.
I think we could get a cram it song going.
We absolutely can.
I've said this already, like the platform that we use when you can test your audio before you start on this streaming service, and they have a song for that. That is my favorite song. So we could just make testing your speaker sounds like it's working. Boom, boom, boom. Have a great show. So there's something in there that like, there's a cram it song even within that range of things. We can just get the people who wrote the audio test song to write a cram it song for us.
Yeah, I'm sure they're not busy.
No.
It was probably a computer.
Oh, for real? The same computer that has USC 26th wrote the audio test song? I hate AI. Do you plug things into AI for real? Just tell the truth. Do you plug things into AI just to see what happens?
No, I don't even know how to do it.
Okay, good.
I don't know where I would go to do it. I see it happen all the time, but
I don't.
Yeah, I'm
when
good.
People are like, just like messing around with like, oh, let's see what AI can draw here of like, what if you had a goldfish that was running for president? What would it look like? And then like 4 seconds later, it's like, there's a goldfish in the Oval Office. And it's like, that's cool. And it's like, is it? You're helping it learn. You're helping it learn. 40 years from now, when a goldfish is the president of the United States, it started with you and the little thing you did on your lunch break because you were bored. Hey, let's see if an AI can like write a novel in 15 minutes. And it's like, okay, nobody's ever going to write anything again because you diddled around. Stop diddling with AI. Cram-o-Meter. There's some good cram this week. So we had our lowest rating of the Cram-o-Meter last week. To recap, as we do every Monday, it's 1 to 1,000, how hard the South can cram it based on what happened in Southern football the weekend before. We forgot to do it week 1 because I'm a bad host. Week 2, 815 out of 1,000. Week 3, 975. Week 4, 901. Week 5 is the first time we broke it, 1,200. Week 6, 1,669. Week 7, we threw it into the center of the sun, 6,500,000. Then we pulled back in week 8, 459,000. Last week, only 652 because Georgia was off and not that much happened. I hope we can cram it harder than that this week because we did have a couple things. We had Texas A&M right at the moment when people were like, oh, baby, watch out for Mike Elko. It's like, you mean watch out in South Carolina where they get drilled by 24? And now I listened to a show on Sunday night that was like, ho, 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 let me tell you about South Carolina. And I was like, just let me drive into a cornfield. Thank God we are not the ho, ho, ho. For real, we have to come on here and try to explain why we think undefeated Indiana is good. And other people are just like, oh, ho, 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 South Carolina. Oh, my God, Landis. It's like a different universe. Oh, South Carolina. Texas A&M lost. Florida was going to beat Georgia till their quarterback got hurt. Tennessee continues to dork around. The number 7 team in the country they're just a bunch of huge dorks. They're just dorking. So this is like their last 5 games. After they beat everybody, they scored 69, 51, and 71 in their first 3 games. And everybody was like, Tennessee is a monster. Since then, beat Oklahoma by 10, lost to Arkansas, beat Florida by 6, beat Alabama by 7, beat Kentucky by 10. And again, after in a world where people want to tell me Kentucky's great. So Tennessee dorking around is part of this, but primarily, Landis, this is Texas A&M getting its comeuppance. And also, check his phone. Hugh Freeze lost to Diego Pavia again. So Auburn's in shambles, which just warms the cockles of my heart. How hard can the South cram it? Clemson lost, and Clemson lost.
Yeah, Clemson was almost a bigger deal to me. Factored greatly into my cram score. Also, we don't talk about Southern G5 teams, but Louisiana Monroe's offensive line coach lost his mind and ran onto the field and then shoved a player on the sideline. So I include that in my rankings as well, or my cram-o-meter as well. But here's what I did. I like to be creative. I like to tie it to things that may have happened over the course of the weekend.
Yeah.
So my cram-o-meter this week is I'm dialing it up to 80,466 because that's how many people were watching Clemson lose to Louisville on Saturday.
I love you like a brother. I love you most during the cram-o-meter. Cram-o-meter Landis is my favorite Landis. You're in the lab. You're a mad scientist in the lab thinking of like, what is my number this week? And I'm just like, Dabo's a weasel, 10,000. And you're like, no, that is not good enough for me. So I'll go 10,000 just because that's a lot. And like Texas A&M, it is one of my favorite things while rooting for the Meteor in certain circumstances. Also, like, who's the puffed up, watch out for them, fall on their face SEC team of the week is just a fantastic experience. So it is going to be hard for some of the other national shows. Are you puffing up Ole Miss this week? Because watch out for Ole Miss. But if Ole Miss beats Georgia, what are we supposed to do with that? Or is Georgia's defense going to be like, Ole Miss is nothing? So I do think we're going to get a good result of Ole Miss, Georgia, right? As much as I don't want either of them to win, one of them's going to be, I think, there's going to be trouble there. We're either going to eliminate Ole Miss from the playoff conversation, or we're going to poke a hole in Kirby. And then Bama, LSU is probably eliminator.
I'm a little nervous about Georgia Ole Miss. If that's like a competitive game that Georgia wins, and then people are going to try to throw a 9-3 playoff Ole Miss in my face, I don't want that.
No. Okay. So now you ruined my fun. Great.
Yeah,
thanks.
Sorry.
And then I hope Alabama, LSU should get rid of one of those teams, so we don't have to think about one of them. The loser's done. Because they're both two-loss teams right now. So I hope that is the case. So I think we'll have some good cramitude. I think we'll find a way to have them cram it next week regardless.
Yeah.
If we come on here and we're like, boy, Ole Miss, Georgia, that was two of the best 5 teams in the country. I hope we see that again in a playoff semifinal. The cram-o-meter's at 11. I don't think that's what we're going to do.
We'll just turn it off for that week. Give it a rest. It's been working hard.
Ooh. Yeah. Okay. Done with the cram-o-meter, which means now it's time for dumb takes and smart takes. What did we think about college football, but mostly our teams in the preseason? We get our comeuppance and maybe a couple tips to the cap next on Kings of the North. I'm going to do this. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis back on Kings of the North. We're going to run through some takes, Landis. I rewatched our preseason show where we predicted the rankings, not the rankings, the records, the power ratings, where we power rated every Northern team, didn't say what we thought their record would be, but we just talked about feelings and how good we thought they would be by the end of the year. And our final power rating on Notre Dame is pretty darn good. How about that? Is that how we want to do it? Is that how you do it in power rating land? Your preseason pick is excellent, pretty darn good, gives me tingles or sucks? Or do you pick a record based on what happens on the scoreboard and on the field? If you're a power rating show, I don't think you should pick a record. Give a tingle rating. I think Notre Dame's going to give me 14 tingles this year. Oh, man, that's ball. That's talking ball, Landis. God. Power rate. Your power rating, if you're a power rating show, is 0. Notre Dame. What I have is what we picked for their records. It's quite a lot of data, actually. And then sort of what we said about them. I'm calling Notre Dame a smart take. So Notre Dame in the preseason, we were like pretty high on them, but not necessarily through the roof. I was 11-1. You were 10-2.
Mm-hmm.
They're now 7-1. Their over under on preseason win total was 10.5. What I said was I have them winning the opener against Texas A&M and then losing something weird in the middle of the season. So I did not call the Northern Illinois loss per se, but can I count that? I had them beating Texas A&M, then losing somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a power rating kind of thing. I'm getting some tingles. I'm getting some September or October Notre Dame tingles. And then also in the course of the Notre Dame conversation, we were talking about what we thought Notre Dame would be at the end of the year. I said, who knew how right this would be? I said, I have USC at 1-11 to give all the Northern Big Ten teams the wins they need to get. How prophetic.
You're on your way there. Yeah.
I don't think I meant that, but I probably should have meant that. I think a situation, Landis, where we were addressing Notre Dame as good, but not infallible, in the playoff mix, but not a sure thing. I think we did a decent job of encapsulating where Notre Dame is right now, which is super interesting right there, but they still make you a little nervous. I think that's where we were on them at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I was actually a little more firmly in this team is for real prior to was it the Charles Jagisaw injury right before the season. Like I had Notre Dame, I think I can't remember. There was a time where I was like 12-0 Notre Dame, or like at worst 11-1. And then I switched it to 10-2 because of the offensive line stuff, and I thought it would lose at Texas A&M because of that. So I guess I was wrong. I was wrong about being as worried as I was about Notre Dame's offensive line, because I don't even know. That's not the reason it lost to Northern Illinois. I don't know why it lost to Northern Illinois, if I'm being honest. But Notre Dame has found a way to work around the issue that I thought would be the thing that would end up being a little prohibitive for them in its postseason quest. But yeah, I guess you were more right about them than I was, because they are right there. And it's funny to think now, if you would have told me, if I knew about the offensive line stuff, and then you would have told me like about the other injury stuff that Notre Dame is going to have to deal with during the year, I might pick them to go like 7-5. Right.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're sitting here with only one loss, I think, is actually a bit remarkable.
The fact that they are in the playoff mix, but you can't guarantee them right now because they still feel like a team that has the ability to maybe go lose one of these games. They get Florida State at home at night this week. Obviously, Florida State stinks. They still have Army. Hopefully, Army's quarterback will be back by then. They do have USC at the end of the year. USC is not very good. But I think the idea that Notre Dame has potential, but you're not sure about them. There may have been places that were more sure about Notre Dame. Oh, they're 12-0. Maybe some places that really doubted Notre Dame. I'm calling it a smart take because we're like, I don't know.
It's okay to not speak in absolutes.
Yeah,
about a team in the preseason.
I had Notre Dame in the playoff in our preseason show. You did not, but that's the whole point. Their win total was 10.5 that it was set. You're at 10. I'm at 11. We were right on the edge in the playoff, not quite in the playoff, and like we're just as uncertain now. That's just, if anyone wonders how this show is going to go, that might be our smartest take. That we were like, I don't know what's going to happen with Notre Dame. And in November, we're like, we still don't know. Nailed it. One of the reasons we're doing a little bit more of a vibes show today is because you and I both had busy Sundays where we did not really have the opportunity to dive in and rewatch and dig into the stats quite as much. I unfortunately went to Indiana for a funeral of one of my friends, and I want to talk about him on the Wednesday show when we talk about what you thinking. But you went to Indiana also, and you went to see Taylor Swift. And so sometimes there are important things that happen in life, good and bad. And it prevented us from diving into PFF grades and rewatching entire games. And so we're vibing it up a little bit. But then, as I said, I listened to another show, and I was like, this show is all vibes. I listened to this for 80 minutes and did not learn one fact about college football. So I'm okay with a one vibes Monday in a full season. Otherwise, we bring the heat, brother.
Yeah, Vibes Mondays are good. I had no opportunity to workshop any college football takes at the Taylor Swift concert, mostly because I couldn't hear myself think, let alone have a conversation with anybody else.
You seemed a little nervous going into that show about I'm a large older man in a place surrounded by young Taylor Swift fans. How'd that work out?
It was mostly fine. I did step on the foot of the woman who was sitting next to me as I got to my seat, but then I think once we got past that little speed bump, we were good. Everyone stands on their chairs, so I felt less bad about being 6'6" and in the way. So,
but you did not stand on your chair.
That'd be a heck of a thing if I was already a foot taller than everyone in the building and then stood on my chair.
And you're like, well, everybody's doing it. Oh, well, here we go. Yeah. So, okay. So Bill was at Taylor Swift. All right. So we feel good about this. Let's vibe up with the dumb take on BYU and Utah combined. This is all of us being dumb, but in looking at some of the teams that have already hit their season win total over, BYU was preseason 4.5 wins. They're obviously way over that. I hope you bet the BYU over. I picked BYU to go 5-7. You picked them to go 4-8. They're 8-0 right now. And then Utah, their preseason win total was 9.5. They are currently 4-4. You picked them to go 10-2. I picked them to go 11-1. And I talked about the idea of I could see undefeated Utah. Let's start with Utah, because here's the one thing I wonder about this. Is it just the injury, or were Cam Rising, or were there some other things there that were below the surface that to think that Utah was going to be a juggernaut and win the Big 12 and be 10-2, 11-1, or 12-0, we would have been wrong about that anyway? Or is this still is this a version of Michigan? It's more injury related, but that, they have a pretty good defense, and then their offense just does not allow them to compete against anybody decent. Why were we wrong about Utah?
I kind of think it's just the injury. I don't know. We like the skill, right? And I think there was reason to. Maybe the offensive line is not tremendous, but I don't know that would have been to the point to make the season unravel. I think the defense is still good. I think a lot of it is quarterback, and then maybe the frustration of losing Cam Rising again helps some lingering stuff maybe bubble to the surface a little bit with the coaching staff. Obviously, the offensive coordinator resigned. I would imagine that was a decision made by the head coach that was then spun on the way to help Andy Ludwig a little bit save a little face by resigning. So I don't want to be dismissive of the idea that there are other issues there that we just weren't paying enough attention to, but maybe those just sort of get exacerbated or not dealt with in the right way as Utah found itself again in a situation where Cam Rising is out and it doesn't have a great alternative to that. But I think too, for me to pick 10-2, for you to pick 11-1, and at least openly discuss the idea of an unbeaten Utah, probably should give a little more deference to injury history when we're doing those things too, right? Than we did at the time.
BYU, most of our discussion was it'll be a little bit better than last year, but having a continued discussion about leaping into the Big 12 is a lot to ask. And it turns out that they were completely ready for it. As we recorded that in the preseason, they had not announced Jake Retzloff as the starting quarterback. That is always something that if there is quarterback uncertainty going into a season, it's going to push me to be out on a team.
Yep.
I think that's natural, and I'm not sure how to get past that. But then there are other parts here. There's a lot of real stuff with the defense. The run game is really good. Kalani Sitake has won in the past. should we maybe have seen this coming a little bit more, even if we were maybe slightly higher than, I mean, we were right around the average, right? They're 4.5 win total. You were 4, I was 5. So we can't give ourselves credit here. Should anybody have seen BYU coming?
Probably maybe just understood that Kalani Sitake is a good coach and was probably going to have his team playing better than it played last year. I just took my cue from him. He told us last year they weren't good enough in the Big 12. I was like, all right, you're probably not going to be good enough again. What am I supposed to do? The quarterback thing was definitely on my mind at the time, because even if it I don't know that I viewed it as them having really a good option no matter who they picked.
Right.
And it turns out they did, because Jake Retzlaff's awesome. So
they had Jake Retzlaff last year and then brought in a transfer to compete with him.
Brought in a transfer like Gary Bohannon, who was good 3 years ago and also has a checkered injury history. It's like, you, in my mind, that's like, okay, well, you view him as an upgrade over what you already have.
Right.
So then I'm going to downgrade Jake Retzlaff no matter what happens. And then Jake Retzlaff won that job, and he's been great this year. So I think it was just underestimation across the board of the players, of the talent on hand, of Kalani Sitake, of Jay Hill, that entire coaching staff. Like, down year for BYU, but a little misleading, I guess, about where the program actually was and certainly where it was headed.
Let's talk about Indiana now. And again, we're stretching for smart takes here. So the fact that you and I had Indiana at, let me look here what we had Indiana at in the preseason.
I was 6-6.
I was 7-5. You were 6-6. Their win total projection was 5.5, and they were picked to finish 17th in the Big Ten. So that we were not in the, we think Indiana is the second worst team in the Big Ten, and you and I both had them in a bowl. I'm counting that as a smart Indiana take. Is that okay? Because I don't think there were any 9-0 Cignetti truthers out there. I think this is okay to count this, that we believed in them, kind of.
I believed in them to have the winning season that it would allow Curt Cignetti to hold true to his Google me, I win thing.
Yes.
I think I had them at 5-6 and then beating Purdue to get to 6-6 and then winning a bowl game to finish 7-6.
Yeah.
And
we both had them starting 5-0, which they did. I said, I have them starting 5-0 on the show, and you said, so do I. And then you had them losing 6 straight after their 5-0 start. But we also said, it's not impossible for them to be 6-0 going into their bye. And I said, they'll start a statue for Curt Cignetti and hopefully have it done by the time they come out of the Nebraska game, because then we thought things were going to get away from them. So we thought they would start good, and they've just continued it. A bowl game and a non-losing season would be a great year one for Curt Cignetti in Indiana. This would be a good way to start the Cignetti era. And then we're saying they could beat Washington at home. Everybody would take that. Like, we were dropping some possibilities there. We couldn't get all the way there. But if there were people picking like, Indiana's going to be terrible, we weren't that. So we okay with smart take here?
Yeah, I think picking that team at the time with all the information we had on hand to have a winning season was putting a lot of faith in Curt Cignetti to turn that around rather quickly. He's just done it to a far greater extent than any of us could have imagined. Did you see, I was reminded of this week because I saw it floating around Twitter, what Curt Cignetti said at Big Ten Media Days about being picked second to last in the conference poll. Do you recall what he said? So he said, I'm just going to read the quote here. I've been picked next to last twice, and we were picked 17th out of an 18-team league, and I get it. The 2 times we were picked next to last, in 2022, we won the conference championship, and in 2017, we inherited an 8-45 team and won 8 in a row and played James Madison the last game of the year to get into the conference championship game. And then he said, no, I'm not into making predictions. That's just a historical fact. And now here they are.
I'm getting you a historical fact t-shirt. Okay. So we'll count that as being in on Indiana, at least more than a lot of people were. I do want to say this. When we talk about BYU and Indiana and teams like that, does it want to make you next year just have a team with a 5.5 preseason win total that you're like, I think they're going 11-1. I'm 6 wins over their win total, to like try to find a team that everybody is wrong about and not just think, I think they'll win 2 more games than expected, but to put your money on the table, because this happens.
I don't, maybe certainly to be a little more open-minded about it. I don't know what was You might not have this handy. I don't know if you plan on talking about them or not. Like Iowa State, I felt like, or West Virginia maybe was that team for us, right? Yeah, West
They're
Virginia
next.
was a version of that team for us. Yeah, so it's not like we didn't do it. We just
just
did it
did
and
it
we're wrong.
We just did it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Iowa State, which we'll get to, they were a 7.5 win total, and we both picked 8-4.
Yeah.
West Virginia is up next. They were a 6.5 win total, and I was 10-2, and you were 8-4. And Neil Brown was our best friend, and now we might be his only friends. We both had West Virginia beating Penn State in week 1. We talked about it all year. I said they have 4 absolute bangers against great teams at home, because they had Iowa State, Kansas, and Penn State at home. And I said, I have them winning all of them. So I said Garrett Green is as dangerous of a passer and runner as any quarterback in the country, that his ceiling is just as high. And then I said, I don't apologize for the hotness of this.
Would you?
So I did it.
Would you like to apologize now?
I'm sorry. I was wrong. What happened? They fired their defensive coordinator. We thought they were going to fix some secondary issues. They brought in a bunch of transfers, and it didn't work.
Yeah, the defense. We talked about that in the preseason, though, right? Like, as we were going through, I think, some transfer portal stuff, we were like, West Virginia's got to address the secondary. West Virginia did. Maybe this will be all right. And it just turns out it wasn't.
It wasn't.
Yeah, so the secondary was far worse than we thought it would be, and maybe we should have been a little more cautious there with that makeover. But I also think that the offense like has lost its way a little bit, right? Or maybe the better way of saying that is that teams have figured out how to defend them a little more. But that 3-pronged rushing attack of Garrett Green, Jaheim White, and CJ Donaldson, with an offensive line that returned a decent amount of production too, just has not operated the same way that it operated last year. That was why I was so high on West Virginia. It's like, this team's just going to come out and run the ball down everyone's throat and win 8-9 games this year and be in the Big 12 hunt. It hasn't really happened, with the exception of a moment or two this season. That hasn't happened.
Yeah. Sorry. Man,
Yeah,
those were the days.
My bad.
I mean, if West Virginia was Indiana, we would be the mayors of Morgantown. Nobody was hotter on West Virginia than us.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. Smart take. I think we were pretty decent on Iowa and Iowa State. Iowa, we both Iowa, I had 9-3, you had 10-2. Their over-under win total was 8. They're currently 6-3, and with their schedule, I think they're not going to get to 10-2, but they have a chance to get to 9-3. They have a chance to hit their win total over. And then Iowa State win total was 7.5. They're at 7-1 right now. We both picked them to go 8-4. I had talked about on the show, on the betting show with T. Shoe, that I liked potentially a bet where you bet both Iowa State, not as a parlay, but bet Iowa and Iowa State to both win 9 games or more, because you could get, I think the odds were like plus 230 for each of those individual bets. So bet it on both, and then if you hit one, you're ahead. And there's a chance that both of those will hit. That if Iowa wins out and gets to 9-3, and Iowa State just has to win 2 more games. So like I think we were there, and we just kind of liked a lot of the stuff about Iowa, but we were a little bit worried about the quarterback situation. I was worried about Cade McNamara's health. You were sort of like, are we sure like he'll be better than last year? Like I think we were in on a lot of this. And as much as we liked Iowa State, you did say I threw a Texas Tech home loss in there. So you picked Iowa State to be good, but lose at home to Texas Tech, which just happened. And I said Iowa State will have a hand in shaping who plays in the Big 12 title game in the last week of the regular season, whether it's them trying to get there or them like playing Kansas State. And so like some of that is still on the board. I feel pretty good that the bottom line is you and I disagreed on the Cyhawk game. I did take Iowa State because I was worried about Kirk Ferentz being suspended for the first game for Iowa. So that wound up being a 2019 game that could have gone either way. Iowa State did win. The bottom line is we both thought Iowa State and Iowa would be very competitive, and they are.
I think we had Iowa down pretty good, right? What it was going to be, which was there was no reason to think the defense was going to be bad. It's going to be typical Iowa defense. And regardless of what you thought of Cade McNamara's ceiling, the offense was still going to take a step. How could it be worse, right?
Yeah.
But I actually think the offense maybe is even a little better than perhaps I was anticipating. Especially, I don't know what it's going to be moving forward, assuming Brendan Sullivan's the guy. But That is a little bit of a different element that would make me feel even better about where Iowa's offense is trending. I saw somebody, somebody who covers Iowa. Forgive me, I didn't write down the name. It might have been Chad Leistokow who covers Iowa.
Yeah.
So like a goal for that team was to like double its scoring output from the year before, and I think there are like 4 teams in the Big Ten who are averaging 30 points per game in conference play, and Iowa's one of them.
Okay.
Or maybe it's for the season. So like it has, aside from Caleb Johnson, I think flown under the radar a little bit just how improved Iowa's offense is. So, but we were anticipating that, which I think was why we were on it with Iowa. And then Iowa State, like, I would love to give myself credit for digging into the matchups with Texas Tech. I was just kind of thinking the Big 12 might get weird later in the year. Let me throw a dart at a game that might make sense.
That's all right.
Pulled that one out of the air. So
darts are good. The thing that I liked about Iowa State is we thought they would be a really good football team, but we didn't go too far. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't go all the way in. We didn't go as far as we did with West Virginia. Maybe we should have, but I think we had a decent handle on what was happening there. Okay, that was a smart take. This is a dumb take. Quote, I'm going to be the grand marshal of the parade when they go 9-3. That's what I said about Nebraska. I thought it was going to happen. They're currently 5-4. Their over-under in the preseason for their win total is 7.5. You had Nebraska at 7-5. I had it at 9-3. So this dumb take is for me and being too hot on Nebraska. You actually had Nebraska nailed pretty well because when I said they were going to go 9-3, you said, I'm a little surprised by the 9-3. So I'm sorry to drag you down on this dumb take. I didn't say this was going to happen, but I broached the idea of Iowa and Nebraska both being 10-1 going into their Black Friday game and that having playoff implications. So why was I so wrong and so hot on Nebraska, Landis?
The schedule, I think, got you there pretty easily as you assessed it in the preseason. Because I think I had in my prediction Nebraska getting to the Ohio State game with only 1 loss.
Okay,
but then I think maybe only winning 1 more game after that or 2 games after that. So the first half of the season, I think you weren't the only one. There were a lot of people who were looking at that like, oh, I wonder if Ohio State Nebraska could be a matchup of unbeaten teams, only because Nebraska's schedule does not look all that daunting. And then you think to yourself, well, if that's the case, then maybe some momentum can build for Nebraska, and even in a more challenging back half of the season, they can still find a way to string together a couple wins. So like, I don't, in hindsight, yes, 9-3 sounds a little loony, but I actually don't think at the time, given the schedule being what it was, that it was that far off base.
I did have Nebraska with that 9-3 losing at Indiana. So I got that right.
Oh,
they did lose at Indiana.
I think you said it was going to be 51-7 too, if I remember.
Oh my God. Thank you for remember. I forgot that part. Yeah. All right. So dumb take by Doug. That is a Doug dumb take on Nebraska. Oregon. I have this as a dumb take. Again, I'm dragging you down. I'm sorry to do this.
It's okay.
I do it every week. You chose to do this show, right? Sometimes I feel bad about it. You chose to be here. You could have quit. Yes, last night. You could have gone to the Taylor Swift show and seen the light and said, I don't want to live my life this way anymore.
No, it helped crystallize for me that this is what I need to be doing, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
You came back. The reason I said this is a dumb take, their over-under for Oregon in the preseason was 10.5. I had them going 10-2 with a win over Ohio State, but then having some other stuff get away from them. You had them at 11-1. I said, I think I'm going to be on an island on Oregon at 10-2. This is almost nothing about how good Oregon is. I think 10-2 Oregon would be a problem in the playoff. Almost all of this for me was the schedule stuff, was the travel stuff. And I do think through the course of the year, from the beginning of the year on, have been taking the travel into account with these West Coast Big Ten teams. I think in general, that has not been a bad idea. I think some of that has been borne out, but I think it did not. I don't know that it's going to apply to Oregon because Oregon's not playing the teams in those situations. Purdue, Michigan, and now I don't think it's going to be Wisconsin who can get them. And also they might be so good that none of that stuff matters. So here's the other thing. This is the also dumbest thing. Again, I'm taking you down. This should be dumb take Doug, smart take Bill. You said, did you pause at all on Boise State? Asking about that game. insinuating that you did pause. Like, okay, well, like this could be a tough game for Oregon. What was that, 39-38?
Yeah.
Boise looked like the better team. And I said, I didn't pause. They have who? What's his name? Ashton Gentry? And people watch this show. Ashton Gentry? Who? Some guy? I said he's one of the best running backs in the country. So at least I knew who he was, even though I didn't know how to say his last name. So I think in the end, I was trying to play a game of Oregon's good, but not quite as good as most people think they're going to be. And that was wrong because they're the best team in the country as we sit right now. And you were much closer to that. We both... You also had Oregon beating Ohio State, but you had a loss in there somewhere else as well. But I don't feel like that's coming. But you were much closer on the Oregon's just going to be awesome bandwagon.
Yeah, I thought Oregon was going to be awesome, but I did have in my projection I had Oregon beating Ohio State, and then I changed that pick during the season because I'm a no good dirty flip-flopper.
Oh yeah, it's okay.
And my loss there was Michigan, which I know we're going to talk about. Because I had the wrong viewpoint on what Michigan was going to be this year too. So, but definitely thought Oregon was deserving of the status it had as like a national title contender coming into the season.
Yeah, I was much more circumspect about that and was wrong. I don't think there's anything. We have to see what the injury situation is now with Tez Johnson, and that really matters to them. But they're an excellent football team. Sorry, I underestimated them. Man, I'm saying sorry a lot, but it's justified. We have to do this. Doesn't this help? I feel like there's a lot of smugness, and I can't believe this. I am the smuggest. Before I started paying attention to national college football shows, I was the most smug person that I was aware of, and now I don't think that anymore. I think I need to ratchet up my smugness to try to compete with some of the other stuff that's out there.
Yeah, I like you watch The Office, right? When they're doing performance reviews, and someone said that Jim was smug, and Michael pronounces it smudge. And then Jim says something, and Michael says, and there's the smudgeness. That's all I ever think about when someone says smug.
All right. When we come back, Ohio State, Michigan, Syracuse, Rutgers, Pitt, Illinois, Purdue, Kansas, Colorado, maybe a couple other smart and dumb takes next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. Give us a thumb, tell a friend, hit the bell, participate in the show. We had a great weekend. We were super excited about that. You know, there's charts that chart things and like where we're up in the charts. Landis, feeling good about that as an independent podcast that's not part of a larger national network. Feeling really good about where we are. And there's a single reason for that. And it's me. No, I'm just kidding. There's a single reason for that, and it's everybody out there. So if you are here right now, if you're listening on a podcast feed, if you're watching on YouTube Live, if you're watching back on YouTube, you're why we can do this. So huge thank you. And the thing that I like the most about this, I'm gonna talk about something here for a little bit. We do have time for me to talk about something for a little bit. Just a thing. Yeah. One thing that came up is the Paul Feinbaum interview on the Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman show last week that we played a clip of that when he took a little shot at us. And we were so excited. It's awesome. We're here for it. And Paul Feinbaum obviously is a legend in college football. Later in that show, Ari asked Paul Feinbaum about BYU. And I don't think Paul Feinbaum could name a single player on BYU. Now, that is not a shot at Paul Feinbaum because I can't name a single player on Ole Miss other than Justin Dart. Justin Dart's the only guy I know. But like, that's the point. He is a national college football voice who at times will take shots at Penn State or Nebraska or whatever, and he doesn't know anything about BYU. So then there needs to be a show where we know stuff about BYU and we proudly know nothing about Garrett Nussmeier. So that's part of the whole point. And then the other thing was I listened to a national college football show that opened its recap with Penn State, Ohio State, and just like did not have a handle on that game at all. And it is a national show that I think admits it has an SEC lean. I could not believe the lack of information and the diagnosis of that Penn State, Ohio State show. And then when that show got into some of the other SEC, it had a lot of information about Texas A&M, South Carolina, but they purported to, like, they led the show with Ohio State, Penn State, and there was nothing to that discussion, which is why we're here. It's why we're here. So we understand that there are different tastes for everybody. There's room for everybody in this marketplace. But I think we want to be here, and it's not about us. It's about the North. And this show is not called the Doug and Bill Show. It's called Kings of the North. We're not the kings. You're the kings. The players are the kings. The coaches are the kings. We're all the kings together because we want to have a community and a culture that wants to be represented. And so the more that gets pushed out there, the more I feel good about this show and the more I feel this show is needed. And I just got some examples this week, Landis, of if you are somebody who is looking for something beyond your own team, oh, I'll go listen to that show. I don't think you're getting served sometimes when it comes to the national shows when they're talking about the Northern teams. They just either purposefully or unknowingly, subconsciously, they lean south. Somebody has to lean north, and we proudly do it. We consciously do it. And I feel great about that. And it's not about us. It's not about you and me. It's about us. And it's about the North, Bill.
It is about the North. No, I feel the same way when I listen. I listen to a lot, and it's all like I'm not it's good, right? I'm not saying people are bad at their jobs or their shows stink. We're just trying to, I think, fill a void, right? That I think very clearly exists in the coverage.
It's just focus and priorities, right? And I'm not saying we know as much as about BYU as the individual BYU shows.
No.
But when it comes to anything beyond that, I'll take us. When it comes to anything beyond that about Iowa State or Ohio State or Penn State or Oregon, I'll take us. Ohio State. I'm going to call this a smart take, Landis. We both had Ohio State at 11-1, and I think the idea was we think they're excellent, but they're not perfect. And I did, again, my travel thing. I said, I think the travel has some effect. Is it a 3-point effect for the Ohio State-Oregon game? I don't know. A 3-point effect might be enough, though, to mean it goes from an Ohio State win to an Oregon win. So that idea of Ohio State's making that trip out in Oregon, you give Oregon an edge, Oregon wins that game by a point. I just think that there were some people who maybe saw Ohio State as a super team, and I think we were a little short of that. You picked them to win the national title, though, right? We both did.
Yes.
We both did. Yeah. Yes. But I think picking them to win the national title without being perfect, that's where they are right now. And maybe like before the Penn State game, it would have been like, man, I can't believe anybody picked Ohio State to win the national championship. But where they are right now, again, I'm not saying I would pick them today, but they're certainly right back in that mix. I think excellent but not perfect was the right read on Ohio State.
Yeah, I think so. How I was wrong about how I thought Ohio State would get about its business. I think I predicted Ohio State to lead the Power 5 in rushing. That has not happened. Ohio State, as we record this, is 43rd in the nation in just total rushing yards. Rushing yards per game, it is higher than that. It's 34th. But I think that maybe speaks to the imperfections a little bit. I don't know. Like, still, I still think it is the most talented team in the country. Which is why I think you and I probably picked them to win the national title. And certainly we're questioning that, not even a little bit, maybe quite a bit after the Nebraska game, coupled with the Oregon loss. But I thought that this past weekend was a reminder of the quality of Ohio State.
Yeah. All right. Dumb take, Michigan. Was it possible to be really out on Michigan going into this year? Do you think that was a reasonable stance to think like they're just going to fall off a cliff? Because you had them at 10-2, I had them at 9-3. Their projected win total was 9. You said, I think their defense will be too good to lose a game they shouldn't. I said this would be like, that would be an excellent season for them to be able to pull this off. But I think there were some people who maybe looked at the quarterback thing. You and I clearly thought it might take, what we talked about was We think maybe it will take a while for the quarterback situation to solidify. We thought that would hurt them against Texas in week 2, but we did not think it would be a year-long thing. I think we clearly had too much confidence in Michigan as a program figuring that out to some extent. Where obviously we were wrong about that, but like, why were we wrong? Should we have been like, I don't know, brother. I think we gave him too much credit.
Yeah, we gave him too much credit. Definitely with the offense, and I think weren't circumspect enough of Sherrod Moore's ability to build a staff in his first year, right? Which we have talked about since then, because I think it's pretty clear he didn't make the right decision at offensive coordinator, and I think some of the results in these games will tell you he didn't make the right decision at defensive coordinator either. So, just a little too much benefit of the doubt given how much that team lost coming off of last year.
Yeah. I'll be curious. I know our guy, Adam King, who is a sportscaster in Columbus, Ohio, he retweeted himself today. This is what people do. I do it too. It's like if you happen to say, the thing where I said that Georgia was going to lose, or Alabama was going to beat Georgia and miss the playoff, I've retweeted that like 4,000 times. Because every now and then when you're right, you pound it in people's heads. He said in the preseason he thought Michigan would lose 6 games. And they appear to be like on track for that right now. So that was like there was room to go there, and you and I did not go there.
Yeah.
So we'll be on alert for that next year to find opportunities where like maybe you should be more out on teams than your instinct is. All right, Syracuse I think is a smart take. I will take this as a smart take. We both picked 8-4. Their preseason win total was 7. They are currently 6-2. I think they have I think they have a chance. I think they're going to get to 8, right? So like, I feel good about that. And sort of where we were was 8-4 for a first-year head coach in Fran Brown. They at the very least should be a bowl team. We thought like this would be a great year. And you said, I think they're closer to 9 wins than 7 wins. So I even think that is right. That if we nail 8-4, but if you look back at the Stanford loss, they should have won that game. I think they exactly might end up as an 8-win team that was closer to 9 than 7, that you might have actually like completely encapsulated what Syracuse is this year, when maybe, I don't know if there were people who were like, I don't know, that win total's pretty high. McCord, I don't know, the Fran Brown. And we kind of bought it. We kind of bought a lot about Syracuse.
And Syracuse did a lot this past week, I think, to kind of keep that on track, right? I really think losing to Pitt the way that it did threw that team for a loop to the point where Virginia Tech, without its starting quarterback and starting running back, had Syracuse on the ropes, and Syracuse found a way to come back and win that game. And I'm thinking that will just kind of help them sort of get back aligned on where they need to be. But yeah, they've definitely. I guess the one thing about Syracuse that is different that I wasn't anticipating is how much of a struggle it continues to be to run the ball. Although LaQuint Dallin played really well against Virginia Tech, so it's like despite that, they've been about what I thought they would be. But if you want to get like super granular with it, it's more of a Kyle McCord show than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. But like a great year for Syracuse. We really thought that Fran Brown, we were very excited. I mean, to be fair to us on our own show and to puff ourselves up, Landis, we really like the Kurt Cignetti hire and we really like the Fran Brown hire. Very different hires, but we really like both of them. And I think the results so far are even better maybe than we would have thought, but we were absolutely in on both of those. No question about either.
You were more in on Fran Brown than I was.
Okay.
I think I voiced some concern about whether or not it was the right profile of coach that Syracuse should go after. More of like a dynamic recruiter and someone who doesn't have any like program building experience or experience with trying to win with lesser assets, I guess, than its competition. Yeah. But early returns are that I was wrong about that. So.
And I do think like the program building, I think is going great. I really do think individually the Stanford loss, we talked about it when it happened. The coverage they called on a key 4th down that led to Stanford winning that game. It was a bad defensive call. And Fran Brown like came out the next week and was like, I put the corner in a bad situation. That's on me. And I think they learned from that. And I thought that was kind of like a first-year head coach mistake that you understand in a game situation. And then I think they got blitzed at Pitt in a way that also was like, okay, off a bye week, like you didn't come in the right way. And maybe it just got away from them, whatever, right? But I think like I think the overall stuff is an A plus.
Yeah.
And then the individual stuff is understandable for a completely new coaching staff and a head coach who's never done this.
I think there's been the Stanford thing is maybe like the most glaring thing you'd point to and say like Fran Brown needs to grow as a coach. But I think like they fundamentally changed their defense to beat Georgia Tech after they lost their best defender. I was like, wow, that really impressed me. And I think the way that Fran Brown handled Kyle McCord in the aftermath of the Pitt game showed me something about like the culture that he wants to set and accountability, while also still finding ways to like empower your players, right? And maybe you would say like, well, of course he has to do that. Who else is he going to turn to? That's not really the point, because he could say whatever he wants to say in a post game press conference about Kyle McCord. He has not had a demonstrated ability to be a program builder prior to Syracuse. Obviously, he wasn't a head coach, but I think there have been markers along the way of this season that tell you he does have that quality about him.
Kurt Cignetti culture, Fran Brown culture, both through the roof right now. It feels like, which is for first-year head coaches, your record really matters. But if you had to pick one, I'd take belief in the culture, and they have belief in the culture and also have great records. Okay, with time, woo-hoo-hoo-hoo, dumb take, Rutgers 8-4 and 8-4, and I chickened out. I said that I can't with my 8-4 Rutgers pick. You were like, what happened? Because I thought I was going to be at 9-3, and then Mohamed Toure got injured, and I previously had been at 10-2, and right now Rutgers is 4-4. Their preseason win total was 6.5. I was all over. I thought that over was free money, and you said the Mohamed Toure injury is a big enough piece to pull out of the defense to worry me. And you had respect for what Greg Schiano has built at Rutgers, but you said, I don't know if what he's built the kind of program to sustain losing that kind of player. And for you to acknowledge the elite talent of Rutgers, but have questions about the depth and the ability to sustain injuries. You were talking about the preseason injury to Mohamed Toure, but that has borne itself out with the other defensive injuries. So we were wrong on the record that we were both 8-4, but I was much more wrong because I was coming down to 8-4, and you were 8-4 and expressing reservations, and then the reservations are what's popped up. So I'm much more wrong than you.
Well, we couldn't predict the other injuries that have occurred.
Yeah.
Like, and I think on the flip side of that, part of it is like they improved the quarterback with Ethan Kaliakmanis, which I think is unquestionably true. The offense, it's not the greatest offense anyone's ever seen, but it's definitely improved from what it was. And I thought they did a nice job of upgrading there, but the defense just fell apart because of injuries. So if that's why you're wrong, then like, that's just bad luck, in my opinion. That's not being sort of like misguided from the start on what that team could be.
Yeah. Pitt, I'll take smart take on this for us. Pitt in the preseason, their win total was 5.5. I had 7-5. You had 6-6. So we both said over the win total, and they're over the win total already. They got over the win total in their first 6 games.
I was low too. Like that was a 6-6 because I was like really contemplating picking a season that looked like last year. And then I thought to myself, like, is Pat Narduzzi really going to have back-to-back 3-win seasons? So I bumped it up to 6, but I didn't feel good about it as I was doing it. So the 6-6 is not entirely reflective of what I thought of Pitt,
But this is what you said. Don't sell yourself out. You said I could see 6. I could see more than 6. I think 8 wins are out there for Pitt. You said I think 8 might be the ceiling, but you said you think 8 wins were out there for a team whose win total is 5.5. So I'm going to give you some love there.
Okay, I'll take it.
Brother.
That's not how I recall feeling at the time. Maybe I should do a better job of matching up my words and feelings if I'm going to be on a podcast 5 days a week. But there was definitely a time, and maybe it was prior to doing that exercise when we did it, that I was like kind of staring at it thinking, what if this offense doesn't work? And Pitt's and like, because I think we might have briefly held a conversation about how hot does Pat Narduzzi seek it if they don't have a winning season, and that was what I was thinking about at the time. Is just like, you made this big swing at OC, but like, what if it doesn't work? Then what do you do?
I was all in on Cade Bell. I think I really liked it, and it turns out now. I mean, it started off hot. Actually, like the offense now, it's sort of like, okay, Can you sustain this over a full season? And this is not to like now be out on Pitt because they lost one game, but the offense wasn't great against Syracuse and they just completely got away from against SMU. I will say this just really quickly. So we already would have cashed that bet. And I did make that a $2 Doug special. I bet the Pitt over of 5.5 wins. These are the Northern teams. There are 6 Northern teams right now who are already over their preseason win total. So you are really exceeding expectations. Pitt was 5.5, they're 7-1. Minnesota was 5.5, they're 6-3. Illinois was 5.5, they're 6-3. BYU was 4.5, they're 8-0. Colorado was 5.5, they're 6-2. And Indiana was 5.5, they're 9-0. So those are the most exceeding expectation teams in the North. So shout out to them. And you guys bet it.
If you have a team whose win total is 5.5 and you bet the over, and then they double it before Thanksgiving, do you think you should get extra money on that bet?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I also think like I really do like alternate lines for that kind of stuff. And I hit some alternate lines on West Virginia and Oklahoma and some other teams of like, okay, not only do I think they're going to go over, but I think this is off. I think they're going to go 3 games over. I just didn't do that like with Indiana. So if you believe something, man, you gotta get to the alternate total so you can really take advantage of your genius or lose even harder, which is what I do. Dumb. Illinois and Purdue. I lumped this together because at least for me, Purdue is having the season that I predicted Illinois to have. So I thought Illinois. I said I originally had Illinois going 0-9 in the Big Ten, and then I decided to give them 1. So I had them at 1-8 in the Big Ten. I said, I think it could get away from them. And then I said, I do not think Purdue is going to finish last. I think they have a chance to be significantly more competitive than people think right now. And you said, I think Purdue could be 3-9, but like an annoying 3-9. And so this again is mostly me. I was way too out on Illinois. And I was way too in on Purdue. So Illinois' win total was 5.5. I had 3-9. You had 4-8. Purdue's win total was 4.5. I had 5-7, and you had 3-9. So this is mostly about me. I was totally wrong. I really thought I didn't think Indiana and Purdue should be the bottom 2 teams in the Big Ten, which is what they were predicted. So Indiana was right about that, but Purdue actually is the bottom team in the Big Ten. Why was I hornswoggled by Ryan Walters?
Well, part of the Purdue thing is that some of the transfers that I remember you being really excited about haven't played much or at all this year.
Yeah.
Right? A couple of the Georgia guys they got, I don't think have been a major part of the deal.
Green at corner.
Yeah, how much would that actually have swung Purdue's fortunes this year? I don't know, but that's at least part of the equation, right?
Yeah.
Also did not get the Hudson Card jump, I think.
Luke Altmaier made the jump.
Yeah.
Especially early season Luke Altmaier, 2 second-year transfer quarterbacks in the Big Ten, which again, we're talking about that second year with transfers okay, here we go. And I was like, I don't know about Luke Altmaier, but watch out for Hudson Card. And it is completely the opposite of that.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know. I was kind of a Luke Altmaier is who he is kind of guy, I think. And he's been better than that. I can't remember what I guess I wasn't all that high on Hudson Card if I picked 3 wins.
Yeah. No, this is me. I'll take this heat. This is me.
All right.
All right. This is another.
Ryan Walters came on the show at Big Ten Media Day. He gets a bonus for that.
He came on the show and I was like, I believe in you, man.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to have to go back and be like, I'm sorry I believed in you. Dumb take. This is back-to-back dumb takes because we're out of smart takes. I pushed it as far as I can. The fact, including, we were like, hey, we thought Indiana might make a bowl. I counted as a smart take for an undefeated team. So I had to stretch a little bit to not make this only a dumb take show. Dumb take Kansas and Colorado. I'm lumping this together because Colorado's having the season we thought Kansas would have. And we kind of really got all in on Kansas. We both had them going 10-2. You did say I did not give much thought to 11-1. You thought it might be more like 9-3. 11-1 is a little hot to me for Kansas. There were people who picked Kansas to win the Big 12. So we were not there. We were not the hottest people on Kansas, but a lot of people are wrong on Kansas. Their preseason win total was 8.5. They're currently 2-6. And again, we both picked them to be 10-2. Colorado's preseason win total was 5.5. I picked them to go 5-7. You picked them to go 7-5. And a 2-game difference there is quite a lot. They're currently 6-2 and absolutely in the thick of the Big 12 playoff race. So once again, this dumb take is much more mine than yours. You have to feel like you saw some of this Colorado stuff coming, because there were definitely some people who were just like completely out on Deion Sanders. They thought it was never going to come together. And you were much more giving them a chance, at least.
I just thought they did too much in the offseason to address the offensive and defensive lines to be the same as they were last year. So if you would have asked me, hey, do you think Colorado is going to be in the Big 12 title hunt in November? I would have said no. But I thought this was going to be a winning team that got to a bowl game and was another step forward for Deion Sanders, because of it was just hard to be worse than they were especially on the offensive line. But I think the defensive line too. Like there's just I figured there would be a significant increase in its level of physicality, which I was definitely doubting after I watched the Nebraska game. But Colorado, I think, has kind of found that footing that I was expecting. But they're still better than I thought they would be.
Yeah. So those are our Northern team takes. A couple other things just from the preseason. Our outrageous picks show. Again, the smartest thing I said all year is Bama will beat Georgia and miss the playoff. I'm going to pick Bama to lose at LSU this week and be out of the playoff race. So that may hit, and I will tweet it 10 more times. You have a little bit of a conflicting thing here, but it's okay, because there's a difference between what you pick and an outrageous prediction. In our official preseason playoff brackets, you had Miami as the ACC champ, which is great. I had NC State as the ACC champ, which is disastrous. But in our outrageous prediction show, you said SMU would win the ACC. So your two ACC picks are currently on track to meet in the ACC title game. So way to nail the ACC, Landis.
That's just me spraying the board to make sure I have it covered. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think we did the outrageous predictions after we did the playoff picks or before.
I think we did outrageous predictions first.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I viewed outrageous predictions as being something different. Like, did not necessarily have to align with my official playoff picks or whatever.
I think that's correct. No, I agree. That's what I'm saying. Like I think you are right on both. You actually picked Miami, but then you're like, all right, let's get crazy. I'm picking SMU, who was like picked 7th in the preseason poll. So you get credit for both of those.
Thank you. I'll take it. Again, I guess correct on how it would play out, a little wrong on the thought process of how it would get there, because as I mentioned the other day, a lot of that was for me was Preston Stone based, because I thought he might actually be the best quarterback in the ACC, and then he got benched in favor of Kevin Jennings, who's played very well for SMU. But that was another team in SMU that I just thought kind of had a little something on the lines that was going to be a problem for teams. I think that's borne itself out.
All right, other outrageous predictions. Again, these were outrageous. So I said Tez Johnson would have 2,000 receiving yards, and then he started a little slow, and now he's hurt, and that's unfortunate. You said Quinshon Judkins for Ohio State would be the 6th player ever with 30 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Do you know how many he has? Did you check? You want to check how many he has right now?
Off the top of my head, does he have 6?
Yeah. That's okay, but this is why you got to take some swings out there. We're not like just saying like what you've been trying to be crazy. I said there would be no undefeated teams. I did bet that. I think it was like plus 200 odds. We have 5 left. And this is again in the regular season. I think Oregon's going to wind up undefeated. So but part of that, if you think there's going to be no undefeated teams, it's you're guessing, for instance, that the Ohio State Oregon loser is going to get tripped up somewhere else. And so that was maybe probably an incorrect thing by me. You restated this when we had Ari on the show last Wednesday, and you were saying it in the preseason. You think the Big Ten would have more playoff teams than the SEC. You said that in the preseason as a wild prediction, which is nobody was there. And this season is like, I don't know if the committee will do it. We'll have to see like who still beats who in the SEC. But to be outrageous with that, you're absolutely in the realm with that. So again, a check mark for you.
I think we are. I would have felt really good about that prior to last week. now I feel like with what we saw in the Big 12 and with Clemson losing, that maybe we're now back to one bid for ACC, one bid for the Big 12, and 4 each for the Big 10 and the SEC.
That is quite possible, although it still could get wild in the SEC. That's not underestimate section.
That's true.
Underestimate section.
Yeah.
Can I read you our Heisman draft before we go? It's our preseason Heisman draft.
Yeah.
Where we drafted 10 players, and you are trying to get the best collection of people who will actually finish high in the Heisman race end of the year. First pick, Jalen Milroe, you. So this is not, our picks were a little different, but this is like you're trying to be strategic, right? Jalen Milroe, first pick, you. Dylan Gabriel, pick number 2, me. This is the best thing I did for sure. Pick 3, Jalen Daniels, Kansas quarterback for you. Pick 4, Avery Johnson, Kansas State quarterback for me. Pick 5, Quinn Ewers, Texas quarterback for you. Pick 6, Cam Rising, Utah quarterback for me. Pick 7, Quinshawn Judkins, Ohio State running back for you. Pick 8, Nico Iamaleava, Tennessee quarterback for me. Pick 9, Abdul Carter, Penn State defensive end for you. Pick 10, Jackson Arnold, benched Oklahoma quarterback for me, who, when we actually did our Heisman picks, was my Heisman pick. It is the earliest that an actual Heisman pick from a person who gets paid money to think about college football has ever been benched. I checked it with the NCAA, and they said, yes, it's you, you ding-dong. Wow. You know who we don't have on there? Travis Hunter. And people were talking about Travis Hunter in the preseason. The odds weren't necessarily there, but there were people who were like, you know what? He's good on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
And you and I were just like, nah, not him.
Give me Jalen Daniels. Yeah, that's and like we wouldn't. I don't think anyone was talking Ashton Genty, right? Prior to the beginning of the season.
It's Gentry, Bill.
Gentry, sorry. Right. Ashton Gentry. He's pretty good, right? Yeah. I don't know. Who else were we supposed to pick? I guess maybe we should have picked Cam Ward, I guess. Like if we were gonna pick some of the other quarterbacks we picked, we probably should have picked Cam Ward.
There is something in here where I really was very open with Avery Johnson at Kansas State, Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma, and then Dylan Raiola as a true freshman at Nebraska, which was part of my big Nebraska pick. I was very open to first-time starting quarterbacks. And a lot of that was like, hey, C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young were good as first-time starting quarterbacks. Bryce Young won the Heisman as a sophomore, as a first-year starting quarterback. And I will never do that again. Like, I just think with as much portal movement as we have
next year when Doug picks Julian Sayin to win the Heisman Trophy.
It's going to be Julian Sayin and Arch Manning in the opener, Ohio State, Texas, and they'll see each other in New York. But I just... good, solid veteran quarterbacks who were fourth-year starters, probably at a different school. I just, you got to be more open than that. That's Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel this year, who are right now 2 of the 4 legit candidates. So,
yeah,
bad by me. All right, that's it. That was vibes. That was dumb. It was a scooch bit smart when we expanded the definition of smart, but you got to help yourself sometime. Tuesday, Dan Wetzel will be here. We'll talk BYU. We'll talk a little bit about like computer rankings and how these things work. Wednesday, Stephen Godfrey will be here. We'll do some coaching carousel stuff. And then Wednesday, you and I will definitely react to the first playoff rankings on Tuesday night. We won't have a live reaction show because maybe we would do that if it wasn't election night, but maybe some other people are going to do that. We're just not going to do that.
I don't want to be
on
the
Wednesday show
Tuesday night.
No, like it's fine. It's okay for other things to matter too. So we will talk about that on Wednesday. And then we'll get ready for our big games on the Thursday show. So I think people know the vibe by now. You know our schedule. We have the Friday morning betting show. Tishu and I did hit the $500 real money bet this week, although we had to hit it by Kansas State not coming back to win that Houston game. It got to the point where if we were going to hit the Houston K-State under, then Kansas State couldn't come back and win. So it was my northern allegiance being put up against winning money. I might have been rooting for money there, Landis. I'm sorry. Chris Kleiman. It's money for the kids. It's money for charity. It's money for the kids.
That's right.
And then we'll be back doing some live post-game stuff at 11 p.m. Do you want to tell the people just who they don't know what your plans are for this weekend?
Yeah, I'll be in Bloomington. I'm going to go to the Indiana Michigan game. I will be. I'll walk around, get some vibes, hopefully talk to some people before the game to see how Indiana fans are feeling, and then super excited to see how that plays out for Indiana.
Yeah.
And I'll probably go to like Kurt Signetti's press conference either way, win or lose, because I feel like it'll be pretty highly entertaining regardless of what happens. So, but I'm very. I've been to Bloomington before. Like you and I've been to Bloomington for Ohio State Indiana games, but never. And this is not that, because Michigan season has kind of fallen off a little bit. But the opportunity for an Indiana to beat a Michigan, I still think means a lot to a lot of people there. So I'm excited to go talk to those fans about that.
I will say I'm not hoping for it, but I'm open to it. A Bill Landis, Mike Kadick chest bump after the game.
Oh yeah. No, I'll try to. I mean, if Indiana wins and they're up for it, I'll try to do something with Mike after the game.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks to you guys for being here. As always, we're nothing without you, and we just want the North to have a place, and we would like it to be here. Maybe someday it'll be somewhere else, but for now, we think it's here. Thanks to our producer, Mike Yerstowski, for making us look good and sound good. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.